Good afternoon, everybody. Most welcome to the last session of the CTU webinars that we're having for the Women's Month event. It's been a wonderful, wonderful day so far. Not too sure if anybody has listened to any of the other recording or the other webinars. I want to welcome all our panelists and we are extremely grateful for your time and that you're joining us in this fourth session of the day. My name is Isa Swart. I am the head of program for the Faculty for Green Technology, a brand new faculty that we've just formed at CTU, and hugely excited about how we're going to go forward with it and deploy into the sustainability concept, as I'm wholly excited about it and believe that each and every person needs to understand how sustainability and climate change and all of that is impacting or will be impacting them by the time that they get to be employed, and how businesses have to adapt to that. I've got distinguished panelists with me. They're all professional people and hugely welcomed and thanked for their time. We know the time out in business is difficult, and I would like for each one of you to know, before we go there, I think, Johan, it's your turn to play the video for us, the CTU introduction to the CTU video. There we go. Thank you so much, everybody. That is our introduction video. I hope you learned something about CTU from that. And I want to welcome our panelists again and give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. We can go by choice, or if you would like me to assign you the opportunity, you are welcome.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, just to Issa and Johan and the CTU team, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. It's such a privilege to be in such a wonderful company, so I'm just really excited about the opportunity to be part of the conversation. I'm the Director of Executive Education at Wits Business School, and I've been in the private higher education learning space for about 25 plus years. So been there, done that, got many t-shirts, but still love to do what I do. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Leonie.
Hi everyone, to the panelists of the afternoon. I'm not going to call it the graveyard shift. I think it's where the energies are high. So it's Mantati Makumbila, and I work for Tiger Brands. I'm in a role which we call people experience, normally known as organizational effectiveness in most organizations. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Really feeling pleased to have been asked to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome so much. And hi, Dr. Candice. You're welcome to introduce yourself.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. What an absolute pleasure to join this panel today. So I am Candice Boyson, and I am an organizational psychologist by profession. I'm the HR director for an organization called Interconnect Systems, and my love for humanity took me to founding an organization based on mentorship and coaching called Releasing Eagles. It's a non-profit organization, which I've been doing for 20 years, I promise not from birth, and currently writing our first book, sharing those stories, 20 years of service, doing mentorship and coaching. Very humbled and honored to be here today, and hopefully share some insights from myself. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. Shall we go for Professor Shiba?
Perfect, thank you. I was just making sure I'm unmuted again this time. Good afternoon, it's Manoj Chiba. I'm with the Gordon Institute of Business Science. I'm very happy to be hopefully contributing positively to this conversation, an important conversation that must be had as well.
Thank you so much. Sabelo. Apologies. Sabelo, shall we give you the opportunity?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure for me to come and speak to the issue of women empowerment, especially on Women's Month. And I would like to say, before we start, Happy Women's Month. I'm the current CEO of the Institute of People Management. I have been in the education sector, professional services, for the past 10 years. Just like I can recognize some of the fellow panelists that we've been together in the space of education, higher education, doing amazing things in terms of creating programs in the space of leadership and management. I look forward to the session and learning a lot from all of you.
Thank you so much, Sabelo. Vilashni.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vilashni. Firstly, thank you to CTU for this opportunity. I'm a professional geologist and an entrepreneur. I've worked across Africa mainly, but also globally, doing business development and strategy. I manage two companies. One is a chemicals company and one is a business consultancy, but my passion is really the NGO that I started recently. It's called Chemistry in Action V4, and it's focused on the education sector. And I'm really looking forward to the conversations, to the networking, and to the opportunities that are going to be made available to all of us. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Mercy.
Last but not least, Isa, Thank you for having me this afternoon, and good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Mercy. I'm a talent acquisition expert by profession, 14 years experience in what you traditionally know as recruitment, but I'm more on the talent acquisition side, and it's different, by the way. So I'm currently working for Massmart as the lead talent acquisition, and I'm really excited to be here today discussing this important topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for the introduction. We're going to jump right in. We have a list of 10 questions that we will work through for the attendees, and I decided to start with question 6. That one sounded to me like having the most gravity. So the information I have here is that 53 African Union member nations had closed their educational establishment by April the 6th, 2020. As a result, almost 20 million students were forced to drop out of school at the pre-primary level. 160 million at the primary level, 56 million in the intermediate level, and 8 million at the tertiary level across the entire African continent. What has been COVID's lasting impact in South Africa, and how have these affected women, young girls in the field of education today? So I'm putting that very heavy question to the panelists. Sabelo, would you like to kick it off for us, please?
Yeah, I think thank you so much. It's a very, I looked at that question and I looked at some of the work that we've been doing in the Human Resource Development Council in terms of quantifying this, but also, just looking at South Africa as a whole, the deep inequalities that exist in South Africa. We all know that during COVID, we were locked down, and some sectors were non-existent, non-operational, and the education sector is one of them. So when we look at the education sector specifically, for example, we started seeing that schools that were disadvantaged, I would argue that rural and those in township schools, we started saying that they couldn't go to school, but because of the lack of technology infrastructure, they couldn't actually do learning online. So there was that learning loss that took place during that, and I think the effects of that are still being felt today. Because if you think about it, for the longest time, we were locked down and kids couldn't go to school, they couldn't study. And if you look at the setup of our homes generally, and as someone who is a leader of business, I'm even seeing it with our employees, where we come from different environments and setup, and the challenges are so different. And most of for those who come from low income areas, disadvantaged areas, because of the lack of the infrastructure. Now, generally, we know that when, I always like to use the example that growing up in an environment where there was girls and boys, you would see that a lot of the domestic chores are taken by girls or women, and therefore it means when your parents see you not going to school, they can think about how can you assist me do A, B, C, and D, and that on its own was just a huge challenge, in the sense that now you can't go to school, but also you are just confronted with the challenges of working or doing domestic chores instead of you going to school. And I think that also led to other things such as dropouts. We started seeing many young people coming from rural areas and township areas in particular dropping out from the schooling system, simply because they had lost quite a lot. But also we know that schools nowadays, they sort of like provide a safe haven for a lot of people who come from disadvantaged communities, and the lack of the inability for them to go to school made them to face some other challenges that were faced by their families, where now you find that due to lack of food, for example, because some of our parents lost jobs. Now everyone now needs to go and start finding work, and that for me is the long impact that is being felt now, because it means we started seeing young people stop going to school but going to look for work so that we can all survive at home. And again, we can then talk about issues of mental health. How, when you look at all these issues, then they definitely added to issues of mental health. Now you can't go to school, you can't, we don't know how to balance everything that's happening around us. We are faced with these challenges of even minor, big challenges such as of hunger, because we know that the schooling system, they provide food for some of the young people who come from disadvantaged communities. I think for me, it's just that we've seen the learning loss, we've seen the high dropout rates, and I think mental health issues were exacerbated by the situation of COVID.
Absolutely, and I'm sure things like gender-based violence and all of those also came to play in the free time and the time that families were sort of in a forced in a position of living close together, and all those social challenges that was picked up at home. So Bella, would you say the rates have picked up again after lockdown, that children elected to go back to school again?
I think the government has done a fantastic job. Not only the government, but also I think many organizations have come into the space, and they've put some really great programs around awareness and advocacy, where you're starting to see NGOs working with government and private sector going more to support those who come from disadvantaged communities. I think in the more affluent schools, you're starting to see technology from an infrastructure point of view being ramped up, so that we can, as learners can be able to go to school and learn. But also, I think it's still a big challenge. We don't have the data as yet in terms of when you look at the actual impact. And I think there's still studies that are being conducted. But I think now we're back, things are changing slightly. I think for me, the question would be, how then do we make sure that we build sustainable communities with sustainable schools or educational institutions that will allow, if for heaven's sake, we face another pandemic, we are still able to go and access education, especially for those who are disadvantaged and marginalized and vulnerable. And these are women, largely young girls. We spoke about GBV, issues of, I think if you look at cases of teenage pregnancy, they were high during that process as well. So there are so many of these issues, and just by addressing that, you are able to then arrest some of the socio-economic challenges that young girls face, or young women face in general.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Sabelo. And Philoshni, would you say, coming from that after post-COVID situation, what is the quality of our school system and the education at this point in time, both for primary and secondary learners?
Thanks, Lisa. So, I cannot comment on the entire system, but recently, because of the NGO I did some research in the science studies sector for secondary schools. And what is very obvious is that there's just not enough development happening with regard to science-related skills. I mean, more than 80% of our public schools do not have functioning science laboratories. So these schools are either not doing any science, or they're just doing the basics, which is reading experiments from books. So, this was very obviously important for me to understand, because I mean, how do we actually inspire students and inspire innovation for Africa if we don't give them a proper baseline in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? So how are we preparing our learners for the high demand of innovativeness that the fourth industrial revolution is demanding, especially in the STEM space. So for me, there's a huge gap, especially in the science aspect of schooling, especially for secondary students, in terms of access and availability to educational tools that will inspire and nurture the skills needed to become STEM professionals. So I can only comment on what I have actually researched, and that is where it sits at the moment. And I'm sure it's like in the other areas as well. There's a serious lack in tools to get these students motivated and inspired to want to be science or STEM professionals.
Exactly. And Leonie, how would you think, how does our current school system support the development of skills needed for future education?
So yeah, it links up to what Volashni was saying, and I think, you know, it's not that I want to be negative, but I think we have to be realistic, and Volashni already started just in terms of what she's experienced. But I think what we need to bear in mind, if we want to develop skills for the future, I think there's a couple of things that we need to focus on. For me, what's really interesting is the ability of our teachers or our teaching staff to fully understand the different learning needs in the classroom. And I think before we can even look at the development of the skills, if your educator is not able to meet the needs of the varying students in the classroom, and that's not by their fault. I mean, if you've got 40 students in a class, how do you, by any stretch of the imagination, transport visual, audio, you know, those types of learners? So for me, that's one key thing, is to support the development of our educators so that they become specialists in what they teach. Because what's really important, if you are going to be a STEM teacher, as an example, you do science, if you're not a specialist in that subject matter, number one, you can't make a performance judgment on that student, and secondly, you don't have the skill set to support that student to improve. So never mind looking at the skills that we require. I think that's one of the fundamentals for me. And then I read something so interesting. Someone was saying it's almost like we still teach for the first industrial revolution. If you just look at the way that we set up our classrooms, it's still dogmatic, you know, to the nth degree, where there's no flexibility in terms of how we allow a learner to learn. So even that classroom environment isn't conducive to create those critical thinking skills, the innovation, the creativity that we need to build future skill sets going forward. So are we building the skills? I think there are pockets of excellence, absolutely, but I think for the majority, there's a lot of work that we need to do, and we have to reimagine what education has to look like before we can even think of what the skills are going to be for the future. So yeah, bit of a tricky one, Ilse.
That's a very tricky one. Sabella, I will be with you right now. There was a very interesting question in the previous webinar asking, in which revolution are we currently? I'm sorry for that, my dog just came in. Not me snoring. Okay. And I think most of us would like to answer it. We are in the fourth industrial revolution with AI and all that. But in South Africa, we are definitely stuck, probably between the first and the second industrial revolution. And that is our reality. And so we've got lots of catching up to do. Sabelo, you wanted to contribute on that question.
I did not.
Would you like to contribute?
Yeah,
No.
I can.
Oh, I thought you were.
Yeah,
Please
I
go
think
ahead.
for me, I still go back to the point that South Africa is an unequal society. I mean, if you look at the public sector, it's the one that is feeling the disadvantages of a non-progressive society, whether economically or otherwise. So if you look at, we are saying at grade 4, as someone who is doing grade 4, they can't read for comprehension. And I think for me, that's a huge thing that we need to focus on. So I would rather, maybe instead of saying what are the skills that we need to build, maybe the question is around the basic competencies that we need to build at an early age. The ability, to read and write for meaning, because if you can't if we can't do that and you grow up with it, and we see it with some of the graduates that we deal with, this person has a degree, but can they comprehend? And the world has changed so much digitally. Now we're talking about so many things that have been introduced by, through digital, through the different digital emerging technologies. So for me, I think it's really about what are those basic competencies that we need to build at that at primary level, even early childhood development, I would argue, and then going up, how then do we ramp those up? And I think in the next few years, we will start seeing the government focusing, its approach differently and making sure that we address the situation. But yeah, it's really about the competencies, whether it's literacy, numeracy, digital, literacies that we need to build at that age.
Professor Shiba?
Thanks, Issa. I think just to build on, because I think the question that you asked up front that Sabella answered, there's also a piece that I think we mustn't forget about. I think the reality is we don't know what the effect of COVID is, and there's just not enough data points to tell us. We can see the start of it, we can see some of the implications. But I think 2 lost years is something that we're not really thinking about clearly, because developmentally, where I was at a certain age is what type of skills I can gain at that specific age. I think we forget about the developmental age of learners, of ourselves as well. And once those years are lost, how do you get it back is not as easy as we often think it is. And I think we're focusing too much on time rather than hold on. Where we are right now, Manaj is X age, what can I teach him to be able to, maybe catch up? But I think we're focusing too much on time. We're not focusing on the human side, which is the human developmental side. The impact that we are going to see is going to be the first fold, which if we just think about what we're here to speak about is around the competency. Sabella is touching on competency here. We talk about the skills, but what is the competencies required for what we need to access the job market? I'm going to argue that half of us here, or as the stats show us, is that the half-life of a skill is 3 years and declining. If I had to try and put that in my simple mind, is 50% of the skills I had 3 years ago is no longer needed today. Whether we're in the 5th, 6th, 10th industrial revolution doesn't matter. I think sometimes we're focusing on the thing rather than the depth of it. And for me, this is where I think we may be losing it a little bit. Is what are the opportunities that we can grasp at? What are some of those opportunities that do exist given the situation that we find ourselves in? I think as humans, we're resilient, and I think it's even more exasperated in this case here, where we didn't do what we were supposed to do. Might I remind everyone, is that in 2018, there was a headline that said that every school, and I can only speak for Gauteng because this is what the headline said, would be connected to the internet. Had we just done that, had we been able to just see through on that, I think we would be a completely different country. We'd be a completely different generation coming through. So I think that's just the one point. So I think competency we've lost. Is that what makes it worse for me, which is really a pain point here, is that the girl child and females are often competing on a competency level, and that's the skills. And that is the problem that we will face further down. We already have a gap. It is a gap that we know that how do we make sure that women can lead the future of South Africa from an education and skills perspective, the competency that you gain at a certain age, if we can't claw that back in some shape or form, taking into consideration time plus developmental stage, I think we're on a very slippery slope to the wrong side. There's the competency side that we've got to be very careful about, and those skills are required. I think the only thing that actually may save us is the industrial revolution, whatever number you want to put to it, is because the world is working so fast. You and I don't have all the skills to be relevant in the next 3 years. And so we've got to continuously learn those skills. And I think we should take advantage of that. And that for me is where I think we must, we know where we are. What should we be doing into the future? I think is an important one.
Well, that's well said, Mtati. I'll pull you in now. I just thought of connecting the dots between Leonie and what Sabelo has said, and also Prof. Shiba. Leonie, the word of pockets of excellence, and my feeling that it should start at home. You know, if we talk about education, not only our educators, but also our parents. I think there's a huge lack there for our parents to understand what Prof. Shiva said, that, you know, the first arguably 3, 4 years, 5 years of a child's life is crucial for certain skills to be cemented. And that is mostly lost because, you know, in that level, you don't have necessarily competent people to guide the child. Mantati, would you like to contribute to that one?
Yeah, thanks, Isa. Look, a very real challenge that we have. And I think when I looked at that question, those stats really freaked me out. But I think what worries me the most is, and I don't know whether we do look at it in that way, with all the challenges that we have, especially as a country where exclusion of a lot of things have always played a role. For me, I see the era we're in, as exciting as it is for those that have, and I'm talking now digitally, people that are connected digitally, people that have the tools digitally, are part of those, are part of the group of those that are in the inclusive. We've now, I think for me, the biggest impact that I saw from a COVID point of view is that it added a new layer of inclusivity, where those that actually don't have the technological know-how, know the tools, have now become the new excluded in the new inclusions. And I think for me, it's a thought that worries me. And I don't know whether we actually do consider it to the depth that it exists. Let's take this webinar, for example. Very powerful, with people with deep skills, people with knowledge. The challenge I have is the girl child that needs to be hearing this and feeling empowered. Chances are she's sitting there with no connectivity, nor do they have the knowledge or the ability to know that this is going on. And I think for me, this is where, if we're going to talk about being realistic and really talking about how we shift the dial, especially in the South African context, we need to start from there. I agree, you know, revolution is happening, things are moving fast. But I worry that we are moving so fast that we're leaving the majority behind. Those millions that you quoted in that question, for me, still remains the concern. That if they've dropped out, chances are, again, how do we get them back into the fold when already this train is running so fast? And that's what worries me. It's how do we need to find a way as a country to really enlarge the inclusivity in this technological environment, where all your other education, things like your math, science, could make sense in an environment that they can be part of. Because at the moment, we're talking about things that I feel the majority of those kids that need this are not even in the fold.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that contribution as well. 100%. Anybody else contribute to that one? No, thank you.
So I just want to lend my voice to
So
this.
the next question is.
Sorry, Isa, can you hear me?
Mercy. Is that
Yes,
Mercy?
can you hear me?
You're welcome.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Now, I wanted to raise another trend that I'm seeing that is quite concerning, and I'm trying to think whether the COVID era had a ripple effect towards the graduate attrition rate. So what I'm seeing currently is a lot of graduates that are getting into organizations, but they're leaving quite shortly after they've entered the organizations. And I'm trying to think, is it because, number one, is there a mismatch of expectations? Are they expecting something that we're not offering? And what role does the home and educational institutions have played in actually enabling them to understand what the workplace is like? A lot of graduates that I see have higher expectations, and I think this has been happening for the longest time, but now it's becoming much more of a problem. So how can we start mitigating such a problem where a lot of graduates are dropping out? And you can think about it in this way. We are in a country where there's high unemployment rate, and these are the same graduates that are saying they're not getting opportunities, but when given the opportunities, they're dropping out. So as an acquisition specialist, I always ask myself, have I clearly stipulated what are you going to come and do? Have I sold the job properly, and do you understand? But where the gap that I'm seeing is there's a mismatch of the expectations. They're expecting something that we can't offer. And how do we start now actually helping them understand that what is the workplace and what would be the expectation from you in your formative years? Yeah.
Sure. Prof. Shiba, what would you say, what are the challenges that that female students experience at the tertiary level, and like Mercy now also pointed out, the war of attrition that happens after that? How does those two concepts play together?
Yeah, so this is something that we often think about, and I think and please, you'll forgive me for the comparison, right? And it's not about a comparison, but we must deal with the data points that exist. When we see from females coming through both the primary school, high school, and into tertiary institutions, they perform better than males. The data shows that. Whatever metric we use, whether it's distinctions, whether it's marks, raw marks, whatever it may be, you'll see that it's done. So from a competency perspective, we find that females are more competent than males, full stop. The data suggests and shows that. There's absolutely nothing that we need, there's no debate around that. The problem, Isa, that comes in is on the confidence side. And I think this is what we often don't see, is that it's not about competence, it's about confidence. It's the confidence that I'll drop out because I'm not confident, not because I'm not good. Males, on the other hand, will say, I'm not good, but I'm confident enough to continue. And that's sometimes the reality, right? And I think it's digging deep and saying, do I have the confidence to be able to push through what's there? This comes with what we see and I think we mentioned it earlier, what starts in the home, to give the confidence to go out and do things. Then in the community, the immediate community. And then how do we support this change around? Because often what we find is that what will happen is that due to a lack of confidence, people bail out. It's not because of a lack of anything else. It's, if like for like is there, it's confidence. And so if we've got that confidence and we can instill that, we're not going to see what we observing, because it's definitely not a competency problem. It's definitely not that. The data is showing me that it's not. And we can look at the data. And so I'm arguing that how do we drive confidence? And just to close that point, because I think for me, how do you build confidence is how do we lift each other up? I think also that's something that we've got to take collectively responsible. Manjaji said something important. How do we make sure that responsibility sits on our shoulders to make sure that the people who should be hearing this message get this message? The fact that they may not be getting this message is our fault collectively here. It's our fault because we haven't taken. We've got the power. We've got the power. We've got the resources to do so, but we haven't. And so we've got to do it, because I always say this: if not us, then who? If we're going to sit here, then we must take accountability for it. Which then Isa says that if we individually do that, how, Isa, in your position, Candice in your position, Sabelo, Mtati, Leonie, all of us on this call, how do we help install that confidence in people that ought to have it? I think we just need to say you've got it. But how do we mentor? How do we coach them and make sure that they've got it? And I think that for me is where this tension arises. But the answer is there. I think for me, mentorship, coaching, confidence is important. For me, I say this openly. I always tell my daughter, you can do anything that any of your brothers do at any time. That's all you need to know. Don't let anyone ever tell you you can't do something. And I think that's a human thing. And I think that's the I want to say attitude, but that's the mindset that we've got to instill. And I think that for me is important. So yeah, I said.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that contribution, Leonie. We'll be with you in a second. So also in some of the previous webinars, the discussion was on all the soft skills. And that we need to empower our girls with, and I think this is one of those, if you want to call it a soft skill, a hard skill that's needed. Leonie?
No, I was actually going to say something tongue-in-cheek, but it's almost like we get born as females with an imposter syndrome. And the graduates that Prof. Shiva was talking about, it's exactly that. It's just too hard. I'm never going to make it anyway, so I'll just step away. And it's the same in business. It's going to be in your career until you get exposed to that opportunity where you connect so deep with yourself. And I think that's where Candice will come in with her mentoring and coaching, where you fully understand what your ability is. And it's that personal mastery. And Candice, I know that's your field of expertise, but it's for all of us around here. You are born with an imposter syndrome. It's genetic. And how do we break that cycle? And what conversations do we have with those girls in the rural communities to understand that you are not meant to carry water up and down the whole day? That is not your purpose. That's not your destiny.
Exactly, and the value of failing forward. Because I think it's the failing that breaks down the feeling of I'm competent and I can do this, and to say, but it's okay to fail. And but as long as you fail forward and you carry it through. Candice, would you like to contribute?
Yes, absolutely. I'm getting all excited and jittery at the conversation because it's so relevant. And thank you, Prof. Chiba, for saying what you said to your daughter, because that's the affirmation. Unfortunately, it's the kind of affirmation that is the antidote to some of the things. Leonie, you said the innate imposter syndrome. And the reality is, so when I started studying and coming from a community in a single parent home, we've got to recognize the statistics in South Africa is real regarding single parent homes as well. And mentorship has actually served as a surrogacy of, and I like to call mentorship the midwife of dreams, whether it's a male or a female. But the reality is single parent homes, that mom is so busy working night shift, working in a factory or something, that affirmation that is required isn't often readily available. And I think you said failing forward, we've got to normalize failure and understand that failure is an important part of growth, because through failure, people develop much better. And I think also back to what you said, Leonie, around that imposter syndrome, is understanding the societal norms. If some of you had watched the Dove advertisements, you know, of there's a gate of beautiful and the gate of not, and the absolute difficulty women has to walk through that gate of I'm capable, I'm beautiful, I'm solid. It's a real occurrence in an everyday circumstance. So I've developed a model where I look at the holistic development of the girl child, which is physical intelligence, emotional intelligence, financial intelligence. Previously, financial intelligence finance were only left to the male counterpart in the house. But then adaptability a quotient. Then also looking at cultural intelligence. So looking at the holistic, you've got to go deep into and challenging the belief system of that young girl, still trying to fight her way through. And even if you're in your 30s and your 40s, you come into the boardroom, you are still faced with the glass ceiling, or there's a new term called the glass edge. Because if you're the only girl in the boardroom, that should be a problem for any of us as women, because we understand that the higher we rise, we bring more people with us. And there's a coined term called the queen bee syndrome, which for the life of me, I don't understand. The queen bee syndrome. It's an academically coined term that was framed, queen bee syndrome. How on earth do we even have that language, in the sense of, you know, as women, we are nurturers, natural nurturers, and how do we not rise and lift others with us? So I think, Prof. Shiba, you hit the nail on its head in terms of just the girl child saying she can do anything her brothers can do. And that is our consistent challenge, to show we girls can do anything that our male counterparts can do. And thank you for acknowledging that and affirming that in the next generation of women.
Sorry, can I just address that
Absolutely,
quickly?
Tati.
I don't think that we need to tell the girls you can do anything that a boy can do. Why do we need to tell them that? For me, that's already being discriminatory. It should be taken. That's how we should be raising these children. We shouldn't have to say, you can be as good as your brother. Why do we need to give them that affirmation? So it's a social construct. It happens. It's right there. It's at the base of being parents, of being teachers, of being employers. We're creating the boundaries, and we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to tell them you can be better. They should know that already. There shouldn't be a distinction.
So
And
it's
very good point. Yeah.
sorry, I'd like to respond to that. I agree with you that it shouldn't be articulated, but the reality is, from where we come from, there are boundaries that is there already. And I don't think that when we say that, it is necessarily creating a boundary. It's encouraging to overcome the boundary. Because if you think about it, you know, sometimes in some households, and I see it with the community work that I do, the boy child gets to go play in the road whilst the girl has to wash the dishes and she has to make her bed. That is how ingrained it is, unfortunately. And so my view is, when Sheba says that to his daughter, is the barrier exists unconsciously or consciously, and we get to overcome the barrier. That's just how I perceive it, not necessarily creating a new barrier, but saying overcome it.
So I want to agree with I want to agree with Dr. Candace. I think it's important that we and unfortunately it's something that's going to stay with us for quite some time. These contexts, we live in a contextual environment, and for us to be able to break those barriers is the ability to identify what those barriers look like. And I agree. Generations are changing. The way I grew up at home, if I had heard that from my dad, it would have been empowering. But because I didn't hear it and I've learned it, it's important for me to make sure that the learning continues. There could be other environments where it existed and there is no need to talk about it because it was part of what the culture in the environment looked like. But I think we need, for me, and this is ingrained in South Africa, is that our cultural context plays a role in a lot of things. And if we're going to make a shift, you see it even in organizations. So for me, being conscious of it gives us the ability to break the barriers. And then I also wanted to just, and I think you touched on it, Candace, is, you know, a female for me is a very interesting human being, because I believe we are born with an innate ability to adapt. And when you talk about confidence, Prof, for me it's about how do we ignite that, because the innate part of it already exists. There is no woman who can't adapt. From a childhood to being an adult, what you do is always, and we call it about multitasking. It comes natural. Some things you're not even taught, but you can do it because it's an innate thing. And for me, it's how do we then find ways to ignite that? Because I believe that it's innate already. It exists. We need to find a way to try and actually ignite it in every female or every young child. And I must say, there's something that we used to run in South Africa, and I miss it because I thought with that type of program, we're going to go somewhere. And I don't know where it ended. But we had a period where in South Africa, we were doing a lot about bringing a girl child to work, which for me, I felt was such a powerful program. And we just seem to have lost that. For me, it was a movement, which as a country, we were conscious about where we were coming from. We were conscious about the gaps we have. And we were conscious about where we want to see the shifts happen. And we seem to have just lost it somewhere. And for me, those are the type of programs that I would say we need to reignite them, because they did serve a purpose, and they did create a difference. And they did give that girl child an ability to understand what it means to be confident in a work environment because of they were seeing it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sabelo. I saw your hand there.
Without maybe laboring the point, I think Mantatu just said what I wanted to say. I think context and perspective is very important when it comes to these things. They are culturally ingrained and socially conditioned, and that requires a mental shift to be able to break those things down. And I mean, Mantaji, you're speaking about the programs of bringing girls to work, and I'm thinking those are fantastic. But I also just think about the ones who come from those rural areas. Do they actually have those programs? When they grow up and get into the workplace environment, do they actually cope? Do they have the confidence that Prof. Chiba is talking about? Because for me, you know, we have to be deliberate in terms of us as parents, our generation. What are we telling our kids? But beyond that, what are we giving them? Yes, I can tell you are confident, but can I actually give you the opportunity to showcase or expose you to experiences that will allow you to be confident, so that you grow up with that, knowing that you are whole as a woman, as a female, you are equal. A friend of mine this morning was talking about, you know, equality is about buying everyone shoes, but equity is about making sure that you buy everyone shoes that fit them. And I thought for me that was just powerful. And I say with all the initiatives that I try sometimes to write, it's about the equality. Now let's give them access, but is it the right access for them? And do we actually understand their needs? Do we actually understand their challenges? I think earlier on you spoke about the work-life integration of a single mom, for example, who is to do multiple things, and now suddenly this person is coming to the workplace, and you don't actually understand the environment. And one of the projects that I did working for one of the business schools, we went to a township, can say it's Alexandra. And at the time I was staying in Alexandra, I never thought I would see such deep inequalities within I would say, a distance of less than 5 kilometers, where you get to understand that people come from different environments. And that, unfortunately, it shapes them and informs them how they show up at work. If it's an environment that does not inspire confidence, you will see that, and there will be huge people will be dropping out from work, simply because the people, chances are the people who work there, they don't actually even understand where this person is coming from. They are expecting results, and then they drop out. We don't understand why they are dropping out. We haven't created spaces that are meaningful for them to shine and work. But can we just be deliberate in terms of understanding the challenges of a woman coming into the workspace, looking at our history as well? Where is this person coming from? If you have 5 graduates, Messi, and I know that I've worked in that space, we always say we want to focus on the disadvantage. Suddenly you've got someone who comes from, I don't know, a rural university versus someone who comes from an urban modern university, and they are coming, they've been given the same opportunity. How do we go about understanding their backgrounds so that we can streamline and be able to put programs that will individually also just look at where they come from? So I think for me, I just wanted to say some of these things are culturally ingrained. It will take some time, but I think it's what we tell our kids at home, the opportunities that we give them. I know, for example, from growing up as a boy child, you are given the opportunities because you are also expected to be a man, and you're expected to be a provider and all of that. And times have changed. Unfortunately, what that does is that it puts the girl child, the female aside, and they never get the opportunities that they want. But yeah, I think with time it will definitely change. If we change our mindset and we're deliberate about what we want to do in terms of changing the status quo.
Prof. Leone, I will be with you now. If I may, I'd like to share this personal experience. I grew up, myself and my 3 brothers, without a dad. He passed away when I was 3 years old. And I remember as I grew up and I had opportunities, went to varsity, but the question was always in my mind, I wish someone would explain to me how to think about this. And of course, I consumed a lot of books, but I think that thing is, the human nature is so volatile and open. If you get someone in your life that say, well, using drugs is a good way of thinking about life and coping with life or whatever, versus, person influencing you and saying, don't go there, but go there, how to think about life. And if I have to put my money on anything, I will put it on educating kids, like we said, and families from the beginning, and get the social structure stronger. Leonie, you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, so what I wanted to say, and it links on to what Sabelo and Mercy's first comment that she made about her graduate. So when we're talking about, you know, how do you support and guide and mentor and all of that kind of stuff. So what we found with our graduate development programs that we run for some organizations is exactly that understanding of the lived experience of the graduate and where that graduate potentially comes from, because you've got the disparity between the two graduates or whatever, if you want to compare them. And with the work that we've done with the clients, that was a very big realization for the clients as well. And then what we've tried to do is then build in a mentorship and a component to I don't like to use this word, but I don't know what other word to use, holistically look at this graduate. So, you know, the skills and everything on the technical stuff all gets imparted through the organization, and that's absolutely wonderful. But it's that emotional understanding of self, and now being able to show up, to be articulate, all that stuff that we want in the organization. And we realized that that was a massive gap, and we've built those into those graduate programs, because Mercy, your organization is not the organization that is facing that same reality. And whether it is because they are Gen Xers, millennials, whatever you want to call them, and they're going to step into the gig economy, and they're all going to be social media influencers or whatever it is, because they also disillusioned most of the time in terms of what they think they're going to do. But it's having those conversations and just understanding where that person potentially came from and where the space that they've landed in now, and are they able to internalize that space? And that's the gap. I think that's that missing link that we can solve for.
Absolutely. Shoo, I would love it. Mercy, go ahead.
No, I just have one burning point I wanted to raise. I think, yes, confidence is critical, but what's also important is building resilience and grit. So to Matati and Sabele's points, understanding the context and then saying to individuals, you are in this context, how then do you respond resiliently to those kind of pressures coming to you? So that's one gap, to actually teach people how to be resilient. I grew up where I was gaslighted every day. You're nothing, and so forth. But rising above those things is important. So teaching people, teaching resilience.
Yeah, Prof, you wanted to contribute as well.
No, I think, you know, I also agree with Bloshni. We shouldn't be needing to have these conversations. We shouldn't be needing to do this. And I think it's important that as a future state, when do we say that this is not a conversation to be had? It's like it's business as usual, if I use the business term here. But in the face of this here, we've got to do it. And I think it's a system level change. If we look back, it's the generations before us, and we've got to blame someone, right? And we're going to have to take blame on something. Yeah. But the reality is that it's generation long embedding of division of labor, worthiness, confidence, resilience, circumstances that has led us to this. And the only way you get multi-level change, and you get this change broadly, globally, locally, regionally, continentally, is that you've got to do it at stages, within the family home, within the community, within the region. And what hurts me here is that there's phenomenal stories and people have overcome. Mercy just mentioned it now. And those are not being heard. Those are not being the inspirational stories that we hear about. Because she's not only inspirational to other female leaders, but it's also to people like myself, that I may have had a similar experience. And we just don't hear this from everyday people like ourselves and people on this call here. I was with 15 phenomenal ladies this morning. And when I say phenomenal, phenomenal, and it warms me because I know there's a future. Men, we have messed up. And I think it's time we admit that. When we sit in boardrooms and we said, we've messed up. Like, guys, we've messed up. Let's take some ownership over that. Yes, we need some help, and let's acknowledge when you need help to be able to fix this. But we also know that we can't build an unequal society. We can't continue doing things the way we've done it. And when I say 15 phenomenal women, I can tell you, hand on heart, it's for me in business, but there's going to be a bright future for South Africa. And you know, that for me keeps me. We know we're sitting in a space that says, hold on. And I'm saying, no, hold on. There's light at the end of this tunnel. That light is bright as well. And you know, we've all got to take accountability, but we've got to support each other. And I think sometimes this is where we may lose it. We've got to support each other. I think Mercy mentioned it, and you know, resilience important. We all need resilience. It's an uncertain, ambiguous tomorrow. We all need those skills. And the more we can impart and support each other in that, for me, is really the pace that we've got to go forward.
Fantastic. Vilashni, I'm glad you're back. Tati, would you like to?
I think, Prof, you touched on something that resonated with me so much. It's the appreciate. I think we also, from a female side, need to start learning to appreciate the very few men who are willing to make our voices heard. And you're taking me back to one of the organizations that I worked for. It's in an insurance environment, and we had one male who became a lonely voice, who stood up to say, we cannot continue as an organization to not have great leaders in the sales environment who are women. And actually went and created a platform and conferences and tools and networking opportunities, which for me is something that has stayed with me till today. I found that very phenomenal, because what he did is he decided, he said, I'm going to take action, and I'm going to be deliberate, and I'm not going to just talk about it, but I'm going to do something about it. And I think we do have those that we need to celebrate in walking this journey with us. For me, they make the journey easier. The only thing is there's just so few.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at this point we can even say, Prof and Sabelo, thank you for being brilliant fathers to your girl child. Children. Thank you so much. We salute you for that. Vilashni, I'd like to put this question to you. What are the key foundational future skills that women need to succeed in the workplace? And I think Candice and everybody can contribute to that. But what are the skills that we need to give our girl children, our female children?
Well, for me, there's three specific things, right? Firstly, it's the EQ, the emotional quotient. So I'm sure lots of people won't agree with me, but I feel that women must stop with the victim mentality. That really needs to stop.
Right.
You are only a victim if you allow yourself to be one. As women, we need to strengthen ourselves from within, and we must take ownership of what we want. We must not look for permission for everything we do, and in the same way, we must accept accountability for the things that happen. So as I said, a lot of people won't agree with me, but that's just how I feel about that aspect. And then of course, there's the 3 C's: confidence, collaboration, and creativity. And the 3 P's: persistence, problem solving, and presence. Prof mentioned that the women excel, but they're not confident. They excel because they're committed. And yes, the self-confidence is the biggest issue in a lot of cases. And we need to instill that somehow. But the thing is, as Manti said, she said, what can we do? Mantati, sorry. What can we do to instill that in the ladies? But a big part of that is the lady herself. It's the girl child herself, or the woman herself. They have got to recognize what they are capable of and what they have within themselves. They've got to stop looking everywhere else for things to justify them doing certain things. And I think that, for me, I've seen that as a big problem. You know, and maybe it's because I grew up with only sisters and I didn't have brothers. So, you know, and being a geologist in a male-dominated environment, it just fueled the fire. But I just feel that we need to start saying, this is how we want it to be, and we work towards that. and stop making excuses for why you are not doing how you think it should be done. So for me, those are the skills that we need to start developing. And of course, in the workplace, it should be an environment where we don't have to create safe and fair. It shouldn't be, we shouldn't have to create it to be safe and fair. It should be safe and fair for everybody. That is the taken, right? And yes, it's a mindset shift. And yes, we're going to continuously be talking about this for the next 100 years. But I think we also need to be cognizant about the fact that we need to all just catch a wake up and accept the fact that these are how things need to happen and stop looking for excuses. So sorry, that's my bit. I'm not sure if it came across too strongly, but I'm very
Velashni, I think
about the fact that women just need to take control.
And one starfish at a time. One starfish at a time. Everyone we can help is wonderful. Amantati?
I was sitting there, I'm dying. I'm like, so Vilosh, I think for me, these are the type of examples of women who need to stand out there and exude this type of confidence so that the younger generations can learn from seeing it. The challenge I have is we've got so many meek females who seem to be in the forefront, that seems to be the normal. And I think the challenge, and I'm putting the challenge to every single female that's on this call, to say, what are we doing to instill that confidence by being the mentors of the next generation, by being the coaches of the next generation, and by actually showing what it looks like to be confident in the environments that we operate. And I always say to people, I always worry when people are having discussions about me without me. And if you look at organizations, and when we're talking about skills, I don't know how many organizations actually engage women to understand what are the skills required, rather than them making up what those skills look like. And for me, this is how do we shift? We need to shift that narrative. But we need people like you to be able to stand up there and say, stop it with the excuses. This is what it means to be a confident woman who knows where they need to go. And for me, I think that's what will shift, because what you see, you learn and you emulate. Yeah. But we have a lot of us being in the forefront to be emulated.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Mantati, I actually do. I talk when I do career guidance days. I talk to learners, not just women. I talk to male, I talk to women, and I do actually. That anger comes out, and they see that I'm really serious. So they better just get their acts together.
Passionate.
Yes, we cannot carry on like this. But I really am just one person. So these platforms, I get to talk to all of you and get you all revved up. So when you go back to the office tomorrow, you're going to call all these women in and say, hey, get your acts together. This is unacceptable.
Passion will get us there. Fantastic. Candice, anything from your side?
I want to say, Velashni, I so agree with you on the emotional intelligence. I think there's been a time when, you know, the tagline of women are so emotional and so you can't trust them with certain things. But giving the women understanding of the emotions is a powerful force, because if you look during COVID, the one minister that dealt with the COVID situation very well was in New Zealand, and she was a female leader. And if you look at one of the first African presidents, it was found in Liberia, and she was a woman. So I think we have examples out there. I think the other skill that our young women and our young girls need is a skill of unlearning. The skill of unlearning the patterns and the things that people have taught us or impressed on us. We do not have to be more masculine in order to be effective. We do not have to be like a man in order to be effective. We can be soft, but if you look at Mother Nature, she is fierce. Mother Nature is not always gentle. Mother Nature is not always, I think we need to redefine what leadership is as a woman into, because a lot of women lean into the analytical side, the left brain. So if we think about cognitive development, it's the analytical, it's the left, it's the rationalization. But they actually shunt the very powerful part of themselves, which is the right brain, the creative side, the nurturing side. If you look at the attributes that women bring into the boardroom, it requires all of the women and not just the left analytical, rational breakdown. I've got to be aggressive to be a leader. I've got to be cold hard. I do executive coaching with C-suite leaders, women mostly. And it's fascinating how a lot of women are far more comfortable in their masculine energy as what they are in their feminine. I had a CFO say to me, Candice, how can I, if I don't dress a certain way, I won't be taken serious. If I don't speak a certain way, I won't be taken serious. Actually, that is what we need to teach our young women, to unlearn the narrative that we need to become more men in order to be effective. Let's become more and be more women, bring everything into the boardroom, your femininity, everything. We've got such beautiful, powerful intuition power. We are intuitive within nature. And sometimes it will not make sense to the rational brain, but in a matter of time, your intuition will be confirmed without statistics. And so I think for the next generation of women, they have to learn to unlearn a certain few things. That is including embracing their femininity and letting go from the idea, I need to become more a man in order to succeed. We not think that we're something else, but I am all feminine, I'm powerful when I am not more analytical, but when I'm in all of it, a balance between analytical and creative. And that is what I strongly believe. Our young girls need to know that they are wonderful and powerful with their frills and their pearls, and also with their softness, that they are powerful. They don't have to be aggressive. They don't have to be isolated. They don't have to be hard to be effective. They can be soft and powerful.
Nice.
Mic drop.
100%.
When did you say that book was coming out?
I'm waiting for it, Matati.
It's coming in September the 22nd. It's launching on the 22nd. 16th September, Cape Town, and 22nd.
Sorry, Candice, we lost you there.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we lost you. Beautiful.
All right, so the book is coming out 16th September in Cape Town and 22nd September, Johannesburg. At Alan Gray, happy to share the information.
Just give us
Please.
the title again, please, Candice.
The title of the book is called Releasing Eagles, Changing Lives. The title is Releasing Eagles, Changing Lives Through Mentorship and Coaching.
Changing lives. Fantastic. I think that sort of wraps our entire discussion. I was thinking, what am I going to say as on the closure? But there's so many loose ends that can be explored that I'm not even going to try that. So I just want to contribute this as well. When we discuss future skills that I picked up on the previous webinars, Lorraine Foster says, obviously confirms that thing of the confidence gap, that the females, we have to address that. Listen to this one. We need to teach our children to speak proper English, business English, for confidence. I think that was a good one. The mentoring and the networking, invaluable skills. The access to information, Tati, what we have been discussing, that's causing a gap. And then we had a very interesting discussion, and I wonder if we can have any feelings about that. We're allowed to have feelings. So one of the male contributors said, our female children need to learn to show up as they are. And then we had, sorry, Leonie, did you get that one? Our female our female children need to learn to show up in the workplace as they are. And then we had a female coming back and said, it's not that easy. We've got microcultures in our businesses, and you have to conform or you will be kicked out of the pack. That skill of dealing with the social microcultures in business. Vilashni, what do you think about that?
Okay,
please tell us exactly what you think about that or feel.
That's a load of pity I'm online, but no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So you have to be present. And when you say be present, you've got to be present for who you are, right? And you in a company, there are lots of cultures, but it doesn't mean that you have to conform to any of them. You can choose to be individual. If there is a culture that aligns with your value system and your beliefs, then absolutely, you can be part of it. But I don't think anybody should be forced to conform to a culture that exists in an environment. That never happen. And if you are being forced to do that, then you're really just being the person who's not you. You're not being the real person. So absolutely not. I will never ever tell anyone to accept that. You must always fight back, because you are an individual and you have certain beliefs and you have a certain way of doing things. And if they employed you because they thought that you're just going to be a puppet and align with that whole process, then you shouldn't be there. So absolutely not. No, never. I'm sorry.
That's where we need the mentorship to back you up and to push you forward. Ntati?
So I think that and with what Velosh said came back as a question in my head, which is what linked to what Mercy said right at the beginning. Could that be one of the reasons, and I'm saying this without the data points, could that also be a reason why we're finding that people come in and leave because of the conformity part that organizations want to impose, where the younger generations, unlike some of us, I'd like to think I'm still young, but people before me, felt in order for them to be, they needed to conform just to have a job, where now the generation that's coming up is saying, I have a choice and I'd like to make that choice. And if an environment is not befitting to my value system, I'm not going to stay. And because we come in with a mindset of, we're giving you a job and we expect you to be loyal, this generation is saying, actually, no. You got to speak to, this organization needs to speak to my values, and if it doesn't, I'll find another one. And I think for me, that's some of the changes in the grappling shifts that organization, if they're not careful, they're going to start suffering a lot from that, because this generation is, look, you can get a job online. Why do I need to be forced to come to the office? Why can't I
deal
work
with
remotely?
the nonsense?
Why do I need to deal with the office politics? Why do I need to be in the office at 7 when actually it doesn't make sense for me to sit in traffic for 2 hours where I could have been productive?
Correct.
So I think organizations are also stifling, but the individuals that are now coming in are saying the values of these organizations are not speaking, and I'm not willing, unlike the previous generation.
Mantati, can I just give you a very quick example? So my daughter, a very quick example. My daughter graduated her degree cum laude recently, and she got a position at a top company. They have in existence more than 70 years. She lasted 6 months. Why? Because she said it was a toxic environment. So now, obviously, being the mother who needs the daughter to have a job, because, hello, that is what you studied so long to do, go and do your job. She refused. She says, no, I'm not. I am not going to do it. I want a job that I am happy in. And I said, but excuse me, I've been through 9 organizations in my working life. you cannot always have a happy job. Sometimes you just got to settle. No, I refuse to settle. I am not doing this job. I am getting out and I will find myself a job that I am happy in. I had to close my mouth. Thank you very much. Carry on. Top company, more than 70 years in business. You know, you would think that they would have all their ducks in a row. Not at all. So absolutely, that is a typical example of what you just said. They are not here to settle, and they are saying, I can be happy in my job, and that's the job I want, and that is the job I'm going to find. However long it takes me, I'm going to find it. So yeah, it's a whole other way of thinking. And I'm pretty old. So yeah, it's a whole other way of thinking.
I absolutely agree that there is a whole other way of thinking. So I did some studies, millennial studies, and specifically at Intention to Quit. So Mercy, you know, I relate when you say that there's a turnaround, you know, people are moving frequently. I also need to say that it's very difficult for young people to say this is not what I want against the backdrop of 38% the unemployment rate in our country.
Yeah.
We have officially overtaken the unemployment rate amongst youth compared to Nigeria. So it's the biggest, you know, if that young person has to decide, and we have many child-headed homes, like young people that has lost mom or dad, or they are the primary breadwinner, they're going to have to find a way to survive in that toxic space because they have to choose between that or bread. And that is the reality of some of our young people in South Africa today. But again, to the intention to quit, Mercy, what my research showed amongst millennials is we used to think that millennials are all about me.I.com. It's all about them. But one of the interesting findings, and I'm allegedly a millennial too, one of the interesting findings is that millennials would interview you. They would ask you, what are you doing for communities and societies? One of the interesting factors of millennials is that they do care, and it's not just about me.I.com ZA. It is about what is your community. I want to be part of an organization where I'm part of something bigger than myself. And I think one of the things that organizations fail to see is that they need to create that connection point. If that young person wants to teach other young people maths on a Friday afternoon, we all know productivity on a Friday afternoon goes out of the door. You empower that young person to go and tutor maths and still retain her or him in the back. Right? So one of the things that we as organizations need to do is to cater for purpose. So whilst I agree confidence, because I think Velocity, your comment goes right back to what Prophet said, confidence. In order for somebody to say, I will not take this, it requires confidence, right? And what that young person is also seeking is mentorship and coaching. They are drawn to, and this is just the South African population and the sample I did in the IT industry, they are interested in transformational leadership. If you're interested, you're welcome to look at my PhD study on when you look at transformational leadership, there is one subconstruct there that's called intellectual stimulation. They want to know, I'm coming into an organization where I'm going to learn something. I am going to come out of this better than what I was before. And I think there we can actually find a midway, not to ask the question, why is everybody jumping? But the concept job embeddedness is, what are we doing as an organization to embed our talent so that they don't go, so that they don't leave, but how can I add purpose to them? Because whilst resilience is important, confidence is important, the sooner we can get our young women to understand their purpose, there's no stopping them.
Wow.
I think we need to teach and create awareness about purpose. If they know what their purpose is, there's no stopping them. We don't have to throw money at them. We don't have to throw anything, but when they know why they were born, that's a dangerous woman. That's a powerful.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to make a closing remark. This was a remarkable discussion, maybe a little bit off topic mostly, but yet wonderful. Leonie, would you like to make a closing remark for us?
Yes, so I believe that the universe conspires to bring a group of people together at the same time at the same place. So I'm going to challenge all of us on this webinar today to reconnect afterwards and see what are we going to do about what we've just spoken about. So thank you for the opportunity.
Fantastic.
Wonderful to connect, and let's see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonie. Mantati?
Wow. Dr. No, I think, you closed it right off beautifully, Dr. Candace. I think for me, purpose unleashes a whole lot of things. And if there's one takeaway for me, it's exactly that. Leonie, I'm up for that challenge, because if we can get 1 or 2 people to identify their purpose, it'll spread like fire. So that for me was an absolutely enjoyable afternoon.
Absolutely. Mercy?
I really love this conversation, and I think Veloshni says something that I really liked, right? Instead of women sitting and waiting for someone to save you and throwing a pity party, it's your role. It's your role. You need to take that up. So I think for me, it's really about taking intentional, actionable steps that are practical for you to get where you need to be. I really love this conversation, and I'm very big on purpose. I know what my purpose is. I have an interesting story, and I really know what my purpose is.
Love to hear it.
And yes, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mercy. Prof?
Thanks. I just want to say thank you. I think this has been a great conversation. It's like you say, maybe a little bit off topic, but I think an important conversation. I think sometimes it goes in a direction because it's needed. I just want us to leave to celebrate each and every person on this call who sat on this panel, because I think we don't have enough of that. We don't have enough Mercies and Tatis, Candices, Veloshni is out there, Leonie is out there. We just, for me, I think there's the elements, but we also need that mentorship. We need that show. And I think for me, that's really important. And I think if we can do that, so I think we need to celebrate each other a lot more. And then this dies down very quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Candice?
From my side, just to say I'm very humbled and very pleased to have been part of this conversation. I want to just acknowledge Sabelo and Prof. About to say salute to you for seeing the importance of women and also supporting women in your world. We need more of you. As much as you say you need more of us, we have to recognize that the males and men in our society has a role to play. I started off Releasing Eagles as a women-empowered organization. It is now a youth-empowered organization, because our men need men like you to understand the power of a woman and how to embrace it and how to use it for the best of humanity and not try and dominate it. I think the other thing I want to say is more of a challenge that everybody that is on this call and part of our dialogue, my challenge to you is mentorship is not for the elite. Mentorship is an art, I will say. But my challenge is if you can identify one young person or even a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, because within 7 years, those neurobrains are formed, that you can affirm on a daily basis. That's my challenge to you. If you are not mentoring anyone, don't think that you cannot. You can. There is no time too late or too early. The more you can speak and support another human being, you can stand in that space of mentorship. So mentorship, not for the elite. My challenge to everyone, if you're not mentoring, go out and mentor. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice. Fantastic. Sabelo?
I just want to say, change begins with us. If we want to change the status quo, it is us that will make that happen. I think when these conversations take place, some women even say it's just a talk show. And I think we need to stop doing that. When I say I don't mean us, I mean us as a society. and make sure that we actually give women the actual opportunities and develop them and allow them to shine, because they are strong, they are resilient, already they are ahead, and let's just give them the opportunities to shine. And thank you so much. Listening to all the women here, I said earlier on I want to learn, and I've certainly learned a lot. And to Leonie's point, let's keep the network, let's keep the conversation going. Your challenge, Dr. Boysen, I think it's a bold one, and I think I'm sure there are other people listening online. Adopt a young female, adopt a young person, mentor them, make sure that we develop our young people in terms of any other skills, life or whatsoever. So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sabelo. And Vilashni, the last word is yours.
Sure. Okay, so firstly, I want to actually salute Prof. Chiba and Sabelo for lasting this entire session. I thought you were going to like switch off your cameras and go scream at somebody and then maybe come back, but you lasted, which is awesome. Candace, I'm still working on my purpose. I think for me, it's going to take a while to bed it down, but I'm working on it, and I'm on a path. To everybody who's put out challenges there, I'm all for it. I think that this has been an excellent conversation. I think that we've all met some excellent people here, and we should definitely do something as a group to instill the confidence, the collaboration, the creativity, the persistence, and the presence in everybody, females absolutely, but in everybody, to make sure that we're contributing to a society that's going to be sustainable and amazing and create an African continent that we are extremely proud of. And we can do it because the potential is there. So thank you to CTU for the opportunity. I really appreciated the conversations, and I look forward to engaging with everybody.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody. We will make plans to get together. Have a wonderful afternoon. And thank you, Johan, again for arranging this lovely getting together of beautiful people. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, colleagues. Bye-bye.